You need to think about this. The increasingly woke bent in Hollywood is no secret to anyone, but just how far back can we go to a degree of creative evolution around social sensitivities starts to make sense. The answer that Oscar-winning actor Richard Dreyfuss gave will make you think much deeper about it than you're used to, and that's what makes it the perfect place for us to explore the ways in which Hollywood is taking political correctness too far. Take a look at this.
Starting in 2024, films will be required to meet new inclusion standards to be eligible for the Academy Awards for Best Picture. They'll have to have a certain percentage of actors or crew from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. What do you think of these new inclusion standards for films?
They make me vomit.
Why?
Because this is an art form. It's also a form of commerce, and it makes money, but it's an art. And no one should be telling me as an artist that I have to give in to the latest, most current idea of what morality is.
By the way, do subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for more discussions like this. Now, here's what I think is interesting. A lot of the younger generation has become so used to the myopic view of morality in the last 20 years that you can't help but find the long perspective of someone like Richard Dreyfuss really intriguing. He's been active since at least the late 1960s, when things were still accepted and the true boundaries of political correctness at the time were more based on anti-communist stance rather than racial politics. So clearly some degree of movement in Hollywood moral veil is useful when it concerns American racial politics from the 60s to today, but no one can argue that it has gone too far when movies are turned less into creative works of art and more into vehicles of social message and engineering. And you know what? If you read the Academy Awards representation and inclusion standards, someone a few decades from now might actually look back and see them for the offensive collective groups it puts a diverse range of people in. That's because when you go down the path of woke intersectionality, you're bound to get finer and finer strands of smaller racial or gender groups that want to break off. Let me read you the part of those standards that's a perfect example of this, and I quote, "At least one of the lead actors or significant supporting actors is from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group in a specific country or territory of production. African American, Black, African, and/or Caribbean descent. South Asian, including Bangladeshi, Bhutanese, Indian, Nepali, Pakistani, and Sri Lankan, among others." But do you see the point? These standards are almost guilty of the same collective race baiting they're supposedly trying to fight against. It puts a diverse range of people with roots all the way from the Caribbean to the African continent into the same group. It puts incredibly diverse countries like India and boxes them into one race when there's actually more than 2,000 different races that make up India's 1.5 billion people. Race is not the same as nationality, and it's not the same as place of ancestral origin when there's a whole host of multiple racial groups that make up that place. So what's the answer to that? Stop playing the collectivist game, see people as individuals, and let creativity and art fly without being weighed down by the ever-changing woke sensitivities of people. You need to have enough trust in your artist as well as the audience that their creative output and political sensitivities will meet in the middle over time. But you can't have that same level of trust in fiat currency in a chaotic world like this, so to get on a stronger financial footing with the help of Birch Gold, click the link in the description or text the word FFIRA to 989898 to get started. Now let's watch Richard Dreyfuss express what I think is a familiar sentiment to a lot of people around the increasingly patronized woke lecturing that's going on in modern Hollywood.
You have to let life be life. And I'm sorry, I don't think that there's a minority or a majority in the country that has to be catered to like that. Do we not know that art is art? This is so patronizing. It's so thoughtless and treating people like children.
I think there's something more worrying that Richard Dreyfuss is seeing. It's not just the standards as they exist today relative to the past, but more so the direction that tells him where Hollywood might end up in the future. It is an undeniable fact, even for the proponents of people that want to rein in art for sensitivity, that doing so happens at the expense of some creative freedom. It's a sliding scale where you need to sacrifice one for the other, and the fact that it's moving too far in the direction of intersectional political correctness means Hollywood may no longer have the creative edge that makes it the biggest and most exciting film industry on the planet, in my opinion, or at least did make it that. And when you extrapolate that, you see something similar happening to those DEI standards in Hollywood as we're seeing intersectionality play out in society, which is that people became categorized into smaller and smaller scattered groups until the point that it becomes impossible for creativity and art to keep up with it. Here's a simple rule of thumb. The larger the gap grows between the reigning societal norms and conventions in comparison to what its art takes on, the more that people are going to feel alienated and uninterested in that art. But does that apply as far back as America's racial politics in the 1960s versus today? Here's where things get a little bit different.
You know, Laurence Olivier was the last white actor to play Othello. And he did it in 1965. And he did it in blackface. And he played a black man brilliantly. Am I being told that I will never have a chance to play a black man? Is someone else being told that if they're not Jewish, they shouldn't play The Merchant of Venice? Are we crazy?
There's obviously a difference between religion and race. When Laurence Olivier portrayed a black man in the adaptation of William Shakespeare's Othello, it was in line with the explicitly racist ideas prevalent at the time that would be unacceptable today. That's why resurrecting something like that is where I think we should draw the line in the past. The answer to Richard's question is no, he'll probably never get a chance to play a character like that because we've rightfully moved on from the racist caricatures that used to be portrayed at the time, even if performed by talented and well-intentioned actors. But no matter how well-meaning you are or how much creative freedom you think is appropriate, there's no denying the fact that donning blackface or brownface evokes the minstrel show of the 19th century, which are racist relics of history. But Richard is right in saying that modern Hollywood has taken it too far by dividing people into finer groups and saying only an actor of a certain religion, orientation, or background can portray certain characters. Those are beliefs and behaviors rather than immutable characteristics like race. That's why Bradley Cooper in the biopic Maestro didn't receive criticism for playing a person of Semitic descent, but for using a prosthetic nose to do so. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments below what you think of the controversy, and probably the last instance of blackface we can find in Hollywood is Robert Downey Jr.'s character in Tropic Thunder back in 2008. But that portrayal didn't really receive the same backlash because the character was an actor in the plot itself, and the whole point of that portrayal was to state how wrong that was to do. Outside of that, it seems that Hollywood's lost the plot about what makes a good film, taking too far a fundamentally agreeable idea into finer and finer social groups. It's probably why so many sequels of great movies are failing, because the gap between their original plot and characters has grown too wide.
Final question. In 2020, you said, quote, "I don't go to a lot of movies anymore because I don't like them. They're not very good anymore. And I probably have missed out on a bunch of really good films, but they're mostly crap." Why do you think modern films are mostly crap?
Because we're going through this strange need to not create, but to create sequels. Sequels are death. Sequels are like, or there was a sequel to Jaws. But there wasn't. No sequel. No, never came close to the brilliance of the first Jaws. And I'm very proud of that.
Richard Dreyfuss has a perspective that not a lot of people do right now, simply for how long he has worked in the industry at large. But while that doesn't mean you have to take everything he says wholesale, there's certainly things he says that you can use as a counterbalance against the woke intersectionality taking over Hollywood today. Ultimately, the audience is the last arbiter of what films work and what doesn't, and seeing Hollywood moving too fast in their DEI policies than the audience can keep up probably means they'll need to become more in tune with where the audience stands on this subject to win them over again.